The homeland is male going to conquest the foreign woman in a lot of these instances. Yeah, Turandot's the same way with... names are going right out of my brain. I think it's because I'm holding the mic. I'm just like...
But it's also a way historically for men in that culture who had power, who had then lost power to another culture, to regain some semblance of control or power. So as a way to maintain the hierarchy, that hierarchical system that existed before it.
Use of super titles is actually something that would allow more people to engage with this in a more meaningful way, because they were first developed in the 70s out of television and then translated into theatrical use cases in the early 80s. So this was not something that was available to Puccini at the time. He wrote in Italian because it was the language of the people, so that his audiences could understand. But contemporary audiences would actually be able to observe a production that happens co-English Japanese. And if they have super titles available in whatever language they use, and also thinking about other assisted device technologies, that really opens up a new avenue to be able to be culturally accurate and sensitive in a way that just was not available to composers during that time.
It would have been lovelier to represent that in a language they speak alone, compared to the language. Then when it gets to the princess with the emperor, it's written in Chinese. That's what I see as realism.
I love that we have the ability and creative freedom in opera to revise things like that, to make them even more thoughtful.
What can the production do? What can the performer do to help, well, I'll say, ease the audience into the suspension of reality? And so whereas nowadays you see artists who are choosing to use blackface or yellowface, and that actually takes away from the suspension of reality because they can't see beyond that act.
The reason why I asked this question is I think the translation is really difficult, because the Puccini wrote this music for Italian language. And the Italian language, if you speak Italian language, you know that the Italian word have specific accento, like vedremo. Because we couldn't say vedremo. Pretty weird, and the accentos actually fit the music.
Let's assume the lesson is colonialism is bad. Is having her leave, removing that lesson? It's not.
Orphaning her child.
What is the lesson of her killing herself? I just don't understand. Also, do operas need a lesson necessarily? Does art have to be moralistic? That can be part of it, but art isn't necessarily always utilitarian, and it can express other things. So I guess
Hello everyone, this is Beatrice. Welcome to my new English section of 慢言书宁. This is a podcast about music with no fixed format. I will talk about music, share my thoughts, and discuss the studies, work, life, and ideas of musicians. I will also invite my friends to have casual and fun conversations about topics that matter to us. And of course, you are welcome to leave a comment and let me know what you'd like to hear. So for the first episode, I'm sharing a discussion I led in my Women and Opera class. I did a case study on Madame Butterfly, and I had a great time discussing it with my classmates. With everyone's permission, I recorded our meaningful conversation, and I'm excited to share it with you. Here we go. Madame Butterfly. This is one of my favorite opera, and honestly, for opera stage director, it's a tricky one. Some basic introduction of this opera. So Madame Butterfly is a 3-act opera written by Giacomo Puccini, and libretto written by Luigi Illica and Giuseppe Giocosa. We already talked about before. And does everyone know the plot? Okay, good. We also talked about the background is based on the same title short story by John Lotherlong, and this story was later adapted into a 1-act play by David Belasco, which Puccini watched and was inspired by. And I remember an article said he didn't know English, just inspired by the performing. Yeah. Let's talk about the difference between the short story and the opera Madame Butterfly in terms of character development and plot. So this is from the reading of Susan McCallery. First, let's look at the character of Cho-Cho-san. In the short story, she's not linked to the butterfly metaphor, but in the opera, the butterfly becomes a key symbol representing her innocence and fragility, like this poster. And it's an important image in Puccini's version. And Pinkerton, in the story, he's just an irresponsible young man. But in the opera, he's often seen as a symbol of Western colonialism, representing the power imbalance. And about the plot, so one major difference in the wedding night scene. In the short story, the process of Cho-Cho-san being deceived by Pinkerton is not described in detail. But in the opera, the scene is charged with implication of sexual violence, which really emphasizes the power imbalance between Pinkerton and Cho-Cho-san. So Madame Butterfly has faced a lot of criticism and controversy. Many people see it as a Western fantasy and imagination of the East, rather than a true reflection of Japanese culture. And as we've talked about before, Puccini based this opera on a short story written by a Western author, John Lotherlong, but he didn't have deep knowledge of real Japanese culture. And Kunio Hara points out that while Puccini used some Japanese musical elements, the story itself still follows a Western-centered perspective. Also, when it comes to character portrayal, Pinkerton shows the modern and powerful Western man, and Cho-Cho-san is portrayed as an obedient and submissive Eastern woman, waiting for her husband no matter what. And this is the ending of Royal Opera House version. I really like this one. It's super beautiful. When she killed herself, all the white flower was falling down, which is stunning, beautiful. So Cho-Cho-san is definitely the tragic woman of Puccini's opera. She represents purity, loyalty, and a naive love. Her tragedy is center of the opera's emotional impact, reinforce Western fantasies of the suffering Eastern woman. But it also brings me a question. Does exoticism in opera mostly focus on foreign women like Madame Butterfly, Turandot, Carmen, Lakme, and why? What do you think?
Well, the short answer is it's written by men.
Any other thoughts?
I think this is particularly true. Actually, even in operas written by women, in Caesar Yaho's L'Amour de Loin, it is also from the perspective of the foreign woman, or in that particular case, she has been displaced from her homeland, and then the prince character Geoffrey, who comes to search for his love for Clémence. He's the one that travels to her, and you also see this in also the oh my gosh, the one set for Ireland. The name of it just went right out of my brain. It's an Irish prince who goes and gets a Scottish woman. Yeah, we talked about it earlier in the semester, and I can't think of the name to save my life right now. Not Tristan. It's that same time period, though. Either way, it's always, yes, you are correct that it's like the homeland is male going to conquest the foreign woman in a lot of these instances. Yeah, Turandot's the same way with... names are going right out of my brain. I think it's because I'm holding the mic. I'm just what is happening? What is my brain right now? Somebody else speak.
Also, I was wondering, what if switch the male and female character, the position? What's gonna happen? Like, for example,
I want a conquering woman. Do it.
Yeah,
there you go.
I know. Let's move on first. But we do have some male character in this opera. I also choose a picture from the Royal Opera House version. This is Goro, and we can see these two servants. In this production, they're always heads down and backs bent, whether standing or sitting. So how does that make you feel about them? The main representative male characters are Goro, a matchmaker. He's greedy and immoral. And Bonzo, Cho-Cho-san's uncle, he's Buddhist monk. And the Prince Yamadori, his stable suitor rejected by Cho-Cho-san. So my question is, what role do Japanese male characters play in shaping the opera portrayal of Japan? How do you feel?
It was Tristan und Isolde, just so we're aware. I was right.
I think when it comes to, I'll say, the portrayal of men and their kind of, I'll say, them being accomplices in kind of the exploitation of their culture, I think it's problematic in a couple of ways because, yes, historically there were people that were using their culture as a financial gain and were willing to sell out their culture and their people for financial gain, specifically, commonly to the Americans. But it's also a way historically for men in that culture who had power, who had then lost power to another culture, to regain some semblance of control or power. So as a way to maintain the hierarchical system that existed before it. So, yeah, the depiction of Japanese men in opera is very specifically as co-conspirators. There's not much in the way of resistance, which I think is unfair. But
also in relation to Puccini's other work, Turandot, that's set in an Eastern setting. He is known for effeminizing Asian men, particularly with Ping Pang and Pong. That is something that it's this kind of dual exoticizing factor of Eastern culture, but also saying that Western machismo, particularly, is this kind of greater force that comes in to generally overtake the Eastern zeitgeist and everything.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's about creating a sense of how Japanese men exist in contrast to Western men, and that would predominantly have been the people with the funds to go see this opera. So obviously I think it's kind of trying to portray them as lesser. I don't know anything to add.
Thank you. Oh, let's move on. So there's another issue is casting controversy. So first, the problem of yellow face, similar to debates over whether Aida and Othello should play by black singers. But I was wondering, does casting Asian singers solve the problem? Asian singers in opera also face typecasting issues. So Nina Yoshida Nelson, a mezzo-soprano, and she's also the artistic director of Boston Lyric Opera and the co-founder and president of the Asian Opera Alliance. In an interview, she mentioned that I have performed Madame Butterfly more than 150 times, but have been cast in non-Asian roles only 3 times. So non-Asian singers have historically been allowed to perform Asian roles, but Asian singers often struggle to get cast in Western roles. So I was wondering, maybe casting should focus on music, our fact system, allowing any singer, regardless of race, to play as long as they fit the voice type. That might be fair for singers. The stage director of the Madame Butterfly at Austin Opera shares this view that for opera companies, budgeting is another concern. You may not have the fund to hire a top singer from the mat, so casting is really a complex issue that requires kind of multiple consideration. And yes, Madame Butterfly is challenging opera for both directors and opera companies, especially in the US, since Pinkerton, the American man, and this story is a total asshole, right? So, my question is, how do modern productions address the challenges in Madame Butterfly? Or more specifically, how can modern production of Madame Butterfly ensure a respectful and accurate representation of Japanese culture while still honoring the opera's original artistic intent? I got some example. So I found some production that I think handle this pretty well, each with a different approach. So the first one is traditional but culturally sensitive versions. The production we are gonna see is a good example. It's a collaboration between Opera San Antonio and Austin Opera, directed by E.L. Lauren Maker, the stage director, who is also the general and artistic director of Opera San Antonio. She joined our directing roundtable 2 weeks ago, and she's amazing. So, yeah, that's true. And for this production, she invites a Japanese cultural advisor to guide the actors' movement, props, and costume to ensure cultural accuracy. I don't know the details of this production yet. We're gonna see. But I found that this is not the first time she directing Madame Butterfly. She directed it in 2019 for Portland Opera. I found an article where she said, Puccini's masterpiece, Madame Butterfly, forces American audiences to consider our history, culture, and the unknown victims of our past foreign policy. Our goal with a traditional setting is to honor Japanese culture through insightful storytelling and modern characterization. So I think that shows her insight, her attitude towards this opera. And I also found that pretty good is the Portland Opera organized a series of culture-related audience engagement events. Like Portland Opera seek to enhance community dialogue and text surrounding this piece. They invite special guest speaker, Dr. Kunio Hara and Dr. Laura Miller, for an evening of insight and conversation titled Context and Conversation, Puccini, Madama Butterfly, and Honoring Tradition. I found she also directed the Madama Butterfly in 2020 in Florida Grand Opera. I found an interview from soprano Sandra Lopez. She said, I have done certain things in every production I performed in a Butterfly. I've seen things done in production, but this director will say, actually, that's not correct for this particular time period. Or she will say that my character would not have done something a certain way because traditionally it was done this way. She's very much wanting to tell the story for it to feel very real. People will feel the humanity in this production. These are not archetypal characters. These are real people. And we have a front row seat to what's going on in their hearts and in their minds. So I'm really looking forward to this production we're gonna see. And another good example is the 2019 called Production of Opera in the Heights and Pacific Opera Project, an English-Japanese version directed by Josh Schwal. And thank you, Ben, for sharing the score with me yesterday. I noticed that Josh Schwal was also one of the scriptwriter, or I would say translator of the libretto. In this production, Americans sing in English and Japanese characters sing in Japanese. And Goro and Sharpless switch the language as culture mediator. Cho-Cho-san only speaks English with Pinkerton, which shows her struggle between cultures. And let's see Umbeldi, Japanese version. Okay. Thank you.
And actually, there's a comment I wanted to make on that.
Okay, now I was ready.
Yeah, here we go.
It's really interesting because working now with new operas that take this like cross-cultural context of some characters speaking in various languages, I think the use of super titles is actually something that like would allow more people to engage with this in a more meaningful way, because they were first developed in the 70s out of television and then translated into theatrical use cases in the early 80s. So like this was not something that was available to Puccini at the time. He wrote in Italian because it was the language of the people so that his audiences could understand. But contemporary audiences would actually be able to observe a production that happens co-English Japanese. And if they have super titles available in whatever language they use, and also thinking about like other assisted device technologies, like that really opens up a new avenue to be able to be culturally accurate and sensitive in a way that just was not available to composers during that time.
Oh, you can.
Yeah, that brings me what I wanted to say earlier, and this is the best time to say it. Back in my country, I used to watch a lot of play, both in the theater and on the TV and all that. So some of the plays are the interaction between the back colonialism, how they interacted with Nigerians. And there are moments where some directors or people who put those plays want to be very realistic about that. They get the white people to play the roles of the British, and the black people play the role of. That makes sense to us a lot. And we go to watch other people, you see a black person acting like a British, because we know as of the time of the colonialism, there was no black person in that position as people who came from British into West Africa. So we get connected when we watch those plays, see the real color play what it is. Until I moved out of Nigeria, and I realized that it's an issue to ask who this role is meant for, to play the role. It sounds so ridiculous to me. And I didn't have any problem when I started hearing the blackface and trying to make someone darken the person's color in order. I don't see any problem in that. We're talking about verismo, which I think is realism, and why don't you make things real the way it is? And why are people so sensitive about that? So it's then another angle to that also is for the new composers to also start thinking about, when you're writing this kind of work that are intercultural, interrace, the aspect you're talking about, let's say, let me use Turandot, Louis singing to the father of Calaf. They should, that aspect, the whole brain is
Keep going.
So that aspect should be, I'm not saying, I'm just like, it would have been lovelier to represent that in a language they speak alone. Compared to the language. Then when it gets to the princess with the emperor, it's written in Chinese. That's what I see as realism. Timur. Yeah. So this is a good paper topic for those who would love to revise.
Yeah.
Well, now I feel silly because that was a great point. And my point has nothing to do with that. I guess I'll let Ben say what he's going to respond to afterwards. But I was just going to... It is hard to speak when you're holding the mic. What am I doing? What are
My bad.
I've never...
My bad.
I think part of the issue is that we're all very concerned about the longevity of record of the internet.
Don't worry, I will edit it. I will edit it.
Okay, so when I was reading the chapters last night, and I was reading about the revision where they switch between languages, I was like, oh, that's going to sound perfectly fine, and also be a great, like another level of power dynamics between the characters when there's already so much in that opera itself. And then we just heard it, and I was like, yep, that sounds like opera. That sounds completely normal. And I love that we have the ability to do that, and I love that we have the ability and creative freedom in opera to revise things like that, to make them even more thoughtful, even if not in a like cultural awareness way, but in like a, oh, this is another cool thing to see the characters interact with, especially when it comes to, you know, the two leads in this. It makes for something that's both educational for the audience, but also like, I don't want to say entertaining because it's more than that. Thought-provoking. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Your next speaker has podcasting experience and can manage it on his own.
And hold the microphone and not freak out. So a couple of things. So first, Josh Shaw did the English translation, and then Eiki Isomura did the Japanese translation. They worked together to do that. I think that kind of, Joe, back to your point, especially in the United States and kind of, let's, to use a broader sense, the colonial countries, a lot of the hindrance and I'll say sensitivity and like attention that we have in colonial countries is the use of minstrelsy as a way to use blackface and yellowface as a way to diminish cultures. And so whereas like I understand like coming from your culture, it's like, well, this is what they were, this is, why would this not be? And then if you have somebody, you're in a place where you can't solve that problem, like, or you don't have somebody who can identify that way and represent that role authentically, why would you not do everything you can? We have prosthetics, we have all of these things. A lot of that is really rooted in minstrelsy and in how respectfully disgusting in the disgusting ways it was used to really diminish and keep down cultures. And then just to kind of like the yellow face discussion and stuff with Nina, and I think it is something that we've seen, and it's especially interesting to see how the Asian Opera Alliance changed once COVID happened, and how much, and especially in that era of Asian hate going in the United States and internationally, and how that changed the alliance. And so it's so interesting to like see that, and then I have had many hours of discussion about like, how do you balance representation with also the concepts of the roles of just the physical ability to perform something? And so how do you do that? And then the point I was shaking my arms and stuff is, when it comes to art, opera asks for a level of suspended reality. Like you have to, we are here in the woods, we are here. And so the question then is what can the production do? What can the performer do to help, well, I'll say ease the audience into the suspension of reality? And so whereas like nowadays you see artists who are choosing to use blackface or yellowface, and that actually takes away from the suspension of reality because they can't see beyond that act. And so then you have this kind of problem, and I think there are ways to make someone other without having to, I'll say, move into minstrelsy and stuff like that.
And I think also there's a matter of you have to, when speaking about like regional and especially rural theatrical productions, they do not have the means necessarily to as accurately represent foreign cultures. But when we're speaking academically about long-standing institutions like the Met and like large theaters in Europe, they absolutely do. And I think that there should be a different standard for houses of that size that demands a higher level of sensitivity to culture.
That's what I want to see. Yeah, because I stayed in UK for 3 years. And from 2000, I was in UK from 2011 to 2014. Then from 2012 to 2018, I was going to Germany every year because I I was a member of the Choral Academy Lübeck at some point with the Schleswig-Holstein Festival, a choral academy. So, and each time we go for that academy, we stay like almost 2 months, and we go back, and we had the opportunity to see productions and all these things. And I don't know if I'm going to be very wrong. I'm not sounding racist, that this sensitivity is too much in America.
Oh, yeah. We also have a history, so you know.
That history is very different.
Yeah, because I see the other like in I'm not going to say entire Europe because I've not been in the entire Europe, but like in Italy, of course you've been in Italy, yeah, like in UK, which also has a history, UK, Germany, and France. France also has a lot of that kind of thing because they colonize a lot of West African, but they try as much as they can to, maybe they just close one side of their eyes and do what they want to do. But America is a wonderful place, but they're oversensitive over things.
Yes.
We did have a whole war internally that millions of people died just about this subject.
We are referencing America's history of slavery.
All right, moving on. Sorry.
Oh, I do have some insights regarding this question. The reason why I asked this question is I think the translation is really difficult because the Puccini wrote this music for Italian language. And the Italian language, if you speak Italian language, you know that the Italian word have specific accento, like vedremo. We couldn't say vedremo. Like it's pretty weird, and the accentos actually fit the music. So that's pretty difficult. And I know in China we have opera company produced the Chinese version opera, and their goal is engage more general audience into opera world, which I think is pretty good. But the thing is, their translation is pretty funny. For example, the La Donna Immobile. You know, La Donna Immobile translated to 女人她轻飘飘. It sounds pretty funny in Chinese, you know. So we do need a good translation. I think that's really a good way.
Amen.
But I think this one is a good example that is really successful, really good translation and fit the music.
You're talking about translation again. It's also is one of the things that that the Western world brought into my country, because the music that they brought in, the hymns they brought in, some composers, Nigerian composers started changing it, putting Nigerian languages into the text. And there's this song that we sang from when we were young, Orakele Ike Jesu. I'm going to explain what that is. What they are trying to do is what we are trying to say there is that everybody should proclaim, or no, everybody should hail the power of Jesus. Do you understand? But because of the accent, the IKE, when you like in my surname, the IKE is what we're trying to achieve, which is power, Ike. But because the music goes in a different way, it becomes Ike, and Ike means buttocks. And when you sing that, we understand what we are trying to say, but it started sounding so vulgar because the generation changed. People started speaking out things like Gen Z thing they talk about. Everybody wants to express themselves. You can't be saying, you can't tell us to come and sing, come and greet the buttocks of Jesus in the church. So they started changing the music, but when you change the music, it doesn't really go well with what was originally written. So,
and I guess that also speaks to the fact that we have more reticence to change notes in an opera than we do words, and that might not necessarily always be the most appropriate thing. And I know in newer works that are kind of meant to a lot of times be in whatever original language they're in, but also English, will have alternative note structures for English words.
Vis-a-vis every Shermer score on the planet.
Yes.
Okay, let's move on.
Yeah, we don't have time.
Yeah, I still have many things. So another approach is symbolic and politically critical versions. Here is a good example of Bregenz Festival. This one is pretty cool, and I really love this production. But honestly, the music quality is not that good because the stage is super big and on the lake, so the singers use microphone. So the quality is not that good, but visually it's pretty stunning. So how do you feel about this scenic design?
The stage is really cool looking. Yes. Like, I would love to perform on that. That's really, really interesting.
Really cool.
The technology of the lightning to change the color.
The projection.
Yeah.
It is such a cool stage. It's a barge, and then they do all kinds of crazy stuff on it, and then they actually really use the water. So a lot of times, like, you'll see, like, I think it was Tosca, where Tosca like went into the water, like they actually like aha, like, and it's really cool.
Yeah. So it do give a strong emotional impact through the visual, and there is one thing I want to mention, that Pinkerton tears the paper and coming out. So there are two halls of the stage, which American people enter from this hall, and also American flag rise from this hall. So a symbol of kind of power colonialism. And the dancers wearing white mask, I'm not quite sure, but I feel it's kind of symbol of systemic oppression to Cho-Cho-san. It's kind of reinforcing to her. And the third one is changing the ending. Instead of killing herself at the end, she picks up her son and takes him off stage. I couldn't find the video of this production, but I found the program. The director wrote a statement that I think is very thoughtful to explain the kind of really creative, innovative production. And she added a director character to this opera to highlight the idea that the story is a Western fantasy of the East. So if you are interested in this program, I can share this on Canvas. So changing the ending of an opera is sort of major innovation. Although this production received widespread praise, but there also someone have some criticism. The bad review said that I don't need an empowered butterfly. What lesson do I learn from butterfly riding off into sunset? Something like that.
I bet that was written by a man.
So my question is, should she have a different fate? Would a new ending weaken the opera tragedy impact? And
it is so ironic that people want to say this when literally his next opera doesn't have an ending, and there are multiple different options for Turandot, like, because he died and there is no definitive ending. So them being like, oh, how dare you make something more culturally sensitive or appropriate in a production over 100 years later, like, is flabbergasting to me, because it is not necessary that she kill herself, let alone the fact that it is a culturally uninformed version of Japanese honorary suicide. Like, I think it goes back to the beginning of our discussion on the fact that he was only using secondary and tertiary sources in order to construct this opera and never had any lived direct experience with Japanese culture. So there is no reason that we should hold ourselves to that in the 21st century.
Yeah.
Well, my question is also, like, what lesson do you learn from her killing herself?
Yeah.
Like, how is, like, let's assume the lesson is colonialism is bad. Is having her leave, removing that lesson? It's not.
Orphaning her child.
What is the lesson of her killing herself? I just don't understand. Like, also, like, do operas need a lesson necessarily? Does art have to be moralistic? That can be part of it, but, like, art isn't necessarily always utilitarian, and it can express other things. So I guess I just question, and I also feel like not having her die stole the pathos of the story was a very different statement than what lesson do I learn? Yeah. Like, those are two very conflicting understandings of the role the ending of the opera plays, which is not necessarily wrong. I guess I just don't understand.
And also, she did not ride off into the sunset.
She
she still, has this tragic, grieving life of Pinkerton leaving. He's the one that rode off into the sunset, for that matter.
She's, like, alone with this kid now, too. And that's also, like, an incredibly difficult life experience. So I just don't understand, like, I think either way how you read it, it's a really, like, difficult moment for her. So I just don't... I would like to ask them what they meant. Because I guess it's
follow-up questions.
Follow-up question for offer goer.
Also, I was wondering, so if a stage director wants to change the ending of an opera, the major concern probably is the music. If the music tell us to do that, does it make sense musically? That's probably the
also copyright restrictions.
Yes.
Well, not this, but other works.
Interesting article that Puccini's work in progress, the so-called versions of Madama Butterfly. So he changed the opera many times. As we can see on this table, I list out the reason why it changed. I found that he do care about the audience. So what I was wondering is, if Puccini were alive today, would he allow even bigger changes?
I mean, I think that speaks to how, like, what we consider the role of opera to be in our society. Do we think of it as, like, a living document that changes and that adapts? Or do we try to think of it as, like, a historical piece? And I think that this kind of shows that opera, in my opinion, kind of inherently changes and grows and adapts over time. Like, it's just a product of how the medium works. So I guess if I had to guess, I would say, especially looking at this, probably he would. Because I think it's just a result of how, like, selling things to different people, drawing in crowds, making your own show kind of changes over time. But
you also see a lot of, like, directors and music directors taking agency of saying, like, I don't like how this ends. How do we change that? And one of the things that they commonly do and are doing now is they are rearranging the order of the score. And so, like, they just did that with Bohème, and they have a production where Mimi lives and she doesn't actually die. And so you can rotate the actual structure of the opera to make it do what you want. So having more flexibility within the art itself.
Thank you, guys. Really great discussion. Thank you. Woo.
We have time.
We
We can keep
another
going.
class period.
Thank you. Thank you. Due to time limits, we have to wrap up our conversation here. Thank you so much, my friends. In the future, I will invite them to continue the conversation. If you're still listening, I really appreciate it. If you like it, please subscribe and share your thoughts. Join the discussion, ask questions, or let me know what topics interest you. See you in the next episode. Bye.